Does it feel like you're always falling short in your relationships? Maybe your partners are complaining that you're emotionally unavailable and you feel overwhelmed by their needs. Maybe you're even starting to wonder if relationships are possible for you. Well, stay tuned because in this video, I'm going to share 5 powerful strategies that can help you become much more at ease and feel much more appreciated in your relationships. In order to bring this to life, I'm going to tell you a story about someone we'll call Zach. Zach is not a real person. He's the product of my imagination, but the themes in his story are very similar to the themes I've heard many times in 15 years of practicing as a therapist. So as you listen, you may see your own experiences reflected in Zach's story. Zach is struggling in his relationship with Zoe, his partner, for the last 3 years. When he first met Zoe online, he found her warm and affectionate. He enjoyed spending time with her. But now he finds her demanding, overwhelming, and irritating. She sends him text messages at work wanting his attention all the time, and she complains that he's emotionally distant and unavailable. Zoe wants to offload to him every day about her work stresses, and Zach offers her good practical advice, but it seems to fall on deaf ears, and Zach is getting fed up with having to listen to the same stories over and over. Zoe says he's not listening to her. At work, Zach thrives. He performs well. He puts a lot of pressure on himself and sometimes he feels quite overwhelmed. These aren't feelings he'd ever share with Zoe. He prefers to cope on his own. And at times of stress and overwhelm, he tends to be more quiet and withdrawn. Zach is spending more and more time in the office and Zoe is getting angrier. But Zach doesn't want to go home to an angry Zoe. He wants her to just grow up and sort herself out, be more emotionally mature. Zach is tempted to blame Zoe, but this isn't the first time he's been in this situation, and part of him wonders if all women are a little bit crazy. And then another part of him fears that perhaps the problem could be him. So what could Zach do to transform this pattern in his relationships? The first step Zach could take would be to reflect on his history. Zach could recognize that when he was just 6 years old, his father left the family home, leaving his mother to care for Zach and Zach's younger sister, who was just a baby at the time. Zach's mother was overwhelmed by emotions and Zach would try desperately to console her and to comfort her. But she was never really soothed, and it left Zach with a real sense that he was failing to be a good son. Zach has learned that you can't rely on other people. The only thing to do is to rely on yourself. And to that end, Zach is very committed to his career. He's worked hard, he's achieved a lot, and he's done so on his own. In reflecting on his history, Zach can recognize that the story of his life is that you better cope on your own because you can't rely on anyone else. He's also had a lot of experience of people in his life, particularly important women in his life, being emotionally overwhelmed and unable to provide him with care or nurturance. He was also put in a situation as a little boy to provide emotional support to his mother, something no 6-year-old has the emotional maturity to be able to give. His history is reflected today in his determination to be self-reliant and his reaction to Zoe's distress. Zach lacks any sense that Zoe or anyone else could be a source of emotional support and care for him. This leads on to step 2. Zach needs to care for his inner child. Zach probably hasn't given a lot of attention to his past before, and he certainly doesn't have time for people's emotions, least of all his own. But if Zach could start to see his younger self with empathy and compassion, he could recognize the loss of his father and what that meant to him, and how overwhelming it was for little Zach to have a mother who was in so much emotional distress and turmoil, and what it did to him to be put in a position of providing her with emotional support when as a 6-year-old he didn't have anything like the emotional maturity required. He can start to recognize how Zoe's distress activates memories of his mother's distress and the experience of overwhelm and being unable to provide what she needed. Zach can begin to recognize his own humanity, that just like everyone else, he has painful emotions. He has periods of stress. There are times when he needs someone to rely on, someone who can comfort him and be a support for him. Zach's little self has a real need to be seen, to be heard, to be empathized with, and to receive the care and the nurturance of other people. Building self-compassion and concern for his inner child is one step in that direction. In building that kind of warm, empathic relationship with himself, Zach can start to bring comfort to himself, to recognize what he's been through. And he can also begin to distinguish between the past when he was a 6-year-old overwhelmed by his mother's emotional needs, and the present when he's an adult whose partner is looking to him for emotional support. Step 3, understand the intentions behind some of the problematic behaviors in your relationship. Zach can sometimes look like he doesn't care much for his partner's feelings or for her needs. In fact, he cares deeply, but his reaction to Zoe's upset is more like the reaction of a 6-year-old who's just desperate to get his mother to stop crying. So he can try to fix things, to make things okay, to take away the emotion, but that lacks the attunement and the empathy of a mature man who can truly support his partner. Of course, for Zoe, being on the receiving end of this, it feels like she's not cared about. It feels like he's very distant, and that is only going to serve to increase her level of upset and emotional overwhelm. Zach can look intimidatingly independent, but his hyper-autonomy is actually a way to help him feel safe by never needing to rely on anyone else. After all, when you can rely on nobody, the only person you can count on is yourself. However, this keeps people at a distance, so Zach never gets to have the experience of someone seeing him, offering him care and support, which maintains his sense of needing to be independent. That leads us on to step 4, experiment with changing behaviors. Now that Zach understands some of the behaviors that are causing problems in his relationships, and he has an understanding of why those behaviors are there and what they're trying to do, he also has the chance to experiment with changing those behaviors. He could start by sharing some of his true feelings. He could share them with Zoe, but if that feels like too much, he could start with work colleagues or friends. He could even start with something as simple as acknowledging that he's a bit tired today, and to see how other people respond to that. Other people may start to see that he is actually human after all, and he can start to have those little moments of connection and sympathy and concern from other people. He could also practice empathizing and listening with people and holding off from giving them advice. He could even say to people, I'm really good at giving practical advice. In fact, I'm told I'm a little too good at giving practical advice. So would you like me to just listen to you, or would you like me to make suggestions? This is also something he could try out with friends or work colleagues before he tries it out with Zoe, if it feels like that's just too emotionally intense a situation to practice this in. With Zoe, he could start to share some of his own vulnerabilities, the stress that he experiences at work, his sense of always having to strive, and his challenges in being open and vulnerable with other people. He can let her know that this is a new experience for him and ask for her patience. Zach could also experiment with asking Zoe what she needs when she's texting him at work, and he can let her know what the impact of her texting is on him. And he can ask her how she might like to be supported, whilst also acknowledging his own need for some space in the workplace. This can give him the experience of being able to both offer support and protect his own boundaries and take care of his own needs at the same time. And that leads on to step 5, observe the reactions. Whatever happens to his relationship with Zoe, Zach will benefit from changing the patterns in his relationships. He will hopefully be able to connect more with people around him. He can learn how to be emotionally supportive without feeling overwhelmed with responsibility for someone else. But I cannot guarantee how Zoe will respond. Zach's change in behavior may give both him and Zoe a chance to do things differently in their relationship and build a more secure relationship in which both of their needs are met. What if Zoe isn't able to respond with warmth and empathy to Zach? What if she becomes overwhelmed by his vulnerability or even gets critical of him? If that happens, it isn't a failure of the task. It's actually valuable information that puts Zach in a position to make a wise decision about the future of their relationship. And that's one of the reasons it's so important for Zach to practice these changes in his relationship patterns with more people than just Zoe, so he can see a range of responses and what might be possible. If you'd like to try this out for yourself, check out the free worksheet in the description or pinned comment that can support you to put this into practice. Now, as you've probably realized, the issues that Zoe and Zach are facing are relational issues. So if you'd like to know more about how couples can support each other in changing these very entrenched patterns, check out this video next.